And lawmakers returned to work on Capitol Hill today. They've got several pressing issues to tackle after their August recess. That includes the House, which took an extended break following Republican leaders' concerns about members pushing for a vote on a resolution to force the Justice Department to release the Jeffrey Epstein files. Prior to their break, House Speaker Mike Johnson contended that by September, the DOJ would be more able to give transparency on the files, making a resolution to compel their release unnecessary. Meanwhile, Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California says he and Republican Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky will hold a joint news conference this week with victims of Epstein, where they will share their personal stories. At the same time, Congress is facing a September 30th funding deadline to avoid a government shutdown. A key issue there, President Trump's effort to cancel funding that was already approved by Congress through so-called pocket rescissions, rarely used but certainly earning ire from Congress. Democrats have warned that any effort to unilaterally claw back money that was previously approved would seriously undermine the fragile bipartisanship required to fund the government. The threat of pocket rescissions is also getting pushback from some Republicans, too, including the Senate Republicans' chief funding negotiator, Senator Susan Collins of Maine. She said, quote, any effort to rescind appropriated funds without congressional approval is a clear violation of the law. Joining us now, reporter covering the U.S. Senate for Axios, Stephen Newcomb. So let's start right there with the funding battle, of course. You've got Susan Collins coming out and saying she doesn't like the pocket rescissions that were used by the president in the White House. That word rescissions, though, is one that they use a lot, and it only makes the funding battle that much more difficult because Congress and Democrats are like, if we're going to negotiate this stuff and then you're going to come around the back end and take back all the things that we negotiated for us, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, it's muddying already really murky waters. And, you know, there's already a ton of bad blood between Democratic leadership on the Hill and the president. In a lot of ways, you know, these funding agreements at some level will have to be a decision between Democrats on the Hill and the White House. I mean, Republicans on the Hill can really only go as far as the White House is sort of willing to let them in negotiating any sort of compromise. So that's sort of the stalemate that we're at. Democrats incredibly upset about the pocket rescissions, saying Trump is breaking the law. They have raised that flag. He's continued to do it. He did it again over the recess, I think surprising some folks on the Hill. So, you know, how do we avoid that shutdown by the end of this month? There is not a clear path to doing so.
Yeah, it's definitely their top priority. And in my conversations, especially with House Democrats, they feel emboldened, but also burned from the last time a shutdown happened. You know, I had Congressman Ro Khanna on the show with me yesterday, and he was talking about how the consensus among House Democrats is we're going to withhold our votes as leverage for everything from what's happening with the Fed to what's happening with the CDC to what's happening with pocket rescissions. Democrats feel they have the leverage on the House side, but they had that leverage before. I mean, has the Senate dynamic changed on this at all?
I think it has changed. I mean, you have to remember, go back to March, the last time that they voted for what was a short-term resolution to get them through to September, 6 months. You know, it was the closest thing that Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has ever had to an open challenge to his leadership. I think that the leadership team understands that in this context, something has to end differently. They cannot take the terms that Republicans dictate, provide, you know, the X amount of Democratic votes needed to do so, fund the government, and then have the president turn around and continue to do these rescissions. It's just not a feasible option for the leadership team at this point. So I do think, given the pressure that mounted last time, Schumer and the folks around him know that something different has to happen at the end of this outcome, and we just don't know what that looks like yet, whether that's a shutdown or not.
I think my sources, too, are saying that there were some lessons learned from that, and that because of pressure, both internal within the Senate ranks, but then also external from the grassroots, this funding fight is going to look a little bit different. We'll see ultimately what it looks like. But one of the other key things swirling in the pot right now is this ongoing issue of releasing the Epstein files. You've got Khanna and Massie pushing it on the House side, trying to show these victim stories at the center of it to compel Republicans to vote to release these files. Doesn't change the fact that leadership thought that a longer recess would let the steam out of the pot on this. Really hasn't happened that way at all.
I don't think it has. And you have to think of this issue as one issue that might not operate the same as other issues in politics. This is a popular culture issue, right? I mean, this is something that is sort of on social media all the time. Every time you open it, there's something else about something else that's going on sort of in this saga. So it's not something I think that, you send lawmakers home for a month. You hope that it simmers down a little bit. I think that it's still at a fever pitch. Folks want to know what is going on. They want transparency from the DOJ. I think Republican leaders were hopeful that the leaders at the DOJ would have some sort of rollout plan or more transparency, and we just haven't seen that yet. So, I don't think that the month break that they took has sort of let all the air out of that balloon yet.
And part of it, I think, is that Republicans were the very ones who had promised their constituents for years that they were going to bring this transparency if they were given power both in the White House and in Congress. They have both of those branches now and are not releasing the files. And then the other piece of this is the discharge petition that Khanna and Massie are trying to force, which is basically a method that would just compel a vote on this on the floor. They think that they have the votes. I mean, do we have any sense of how leadership would deal with that if they are once again pushed to the brink on an issue that puts them in such a weird place, with a White House who wants to talk about anything but this and a Congress that feels the pressure to compel the release?
Yeah, again, it's kind of that dynamic of Republicans on the Hill can only go as far as the White House will let them. At least the leadership will. I'm sure that there are procedural moves that Speaker Johnson and his team are considering if the discharge petition comes forward, moving to table. There's a couple of parliamentarian things that they can do to try to get themselves out of it. But the reality is if Mr. Khanna, Mr. Massie have the votes that they need, it could be really hard for Johnson to dodge this one and for the White House to dodge this one as well. So we'll have to see how much support there is in the rank and file. But I would expect there to be a decent amount of support on the House side.
Yeah, I mean, Khanna's unofficial whip count says he's got all 212 Democrats and that Massie can bring to the table a dozen Republicans. Really, all they need for that discharge petition is 218 signatures at a minimum. It's a longer process. It needs to ripen, a word that we use a lot on Capitol Hill. But that's definitely one of the things that we'll be watching really closely this week. And then there's a few others. You've got some new reporting on demands from Senate Democrats that Republicans postpone a confirmation hearing for a key Federal Reserve nominee. He's supposed to be on the Hill later this week. That's Stephen Miron. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, Democrats on the Hill are incensed by what they say is the attempted firing of Fed Governor Cook. There's not a sort of conclusion there yet. That firing is being challenged in court. Mrs. Cook said that she will not leave the position. She will continue to do the job. But Democrats see this as Trump trying to take over the board of the Federal Reserve. And obviously, he's very upset with Jerome Powell, the chairman, for not lowering interest rates. They see this as what they've said is a hostile takeover. And they want Republican leaders on the Hill to postpone any hearings for any Fed governors going forward until they hold hearings about the unilateral sort of moves that Trump has made to relieve Ms. Cook of her duty. It really is unprecedented what the president is doing on the Fed board to try and sort of have a favorable group of people that will, vote to lower interest rates. That's really what it is. That's what the president wants. So Democrats don't have a ton of power here, but they can complain and raise their alarm with Republican leadership, and we'll have to see if they listen.
And I think there's also some private uncomfortability on the part of Republicans who have always seen the Fed as an independent entity, which it still is. And for Trump, there's the two prongs of this, right? There's the legal avenue where he's trying to say he has cause over allegations to fire Lisa Cook. That's working its way through the courts. And then, of course, there's the financial and political pieces of this where Republicans, again, approve of an independent Fed. And the longer this waits out, the closer you get to the September meeting of the Fed, where they are once again going to meet about rate cuts. And the Fed chair has signaled they are likely to cut them at that point. As if that wasn't enough, we also have a potential RFK Jr. hearing at some point on the Hill this week. They are back and in force. Stephen Newcomb, get your Celsius, get your coffee. You're going to need it. Thank you for coming on with us.
Yeah.